Okay, you can all hear me. Okay, cool. Hello everyone. Housekeeping. I'm not Jeremy Moskowitz. He's in hospital. Yeah, he's got pneumonia. So 10:30 this morning, they said, hey, do you know anything about group policy? And I said, yeah, I think I do. But this is not my session, okay? I've never done this session before. I know a bit about group policy troubleshooting. All right, so I hope that there will be some value in this session for you. Please forgive me on the evals. All right? Does the guy know his topic? Maybe not as well as Jeremy would have, because he's a legend, and this is his session. There's his Twitter, and today is technically also his birthday. So we all feel really sorry for Jeremy Moskowitz. That's his Twitter. Send him a Twitter saying, get well soon, happy birthday. Right? Outpouring of love to him. So, some more housekeeping. He's doing 2 sessions tomorrow. No, he's not. So, tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., I'm doing a repeat of my session that I did yesterday. Okay? But I'm not going to talk, I'm going to kind of talk about the same thing, group policy preferences, but I'm going to show you a whole heap of other group policy preferences demos. So it's not going to be an exact repeat. It'll probably be, 30% the same. I'll still cover some topics because some people missed out yesterday. But I'll show you a heap of more demos because, I got a lot of really good feedback from it. And some people missed out and some people wanted to see more. So, that works out. And then I'm going to plug the next session, which is tomorrow afternoon. I'm doing a Windows 7 App Locker, BitLocker session. It was going to be Jeremy does the App Locker part, and I do the BitLocker. I'm just going to do it all now. That session will rock. It's kind of about group policy as well. So who am I? I'm Alan Birchall. Hi. I'm also a group policy MVP. That's my website. If you haven't bookmarked it, bookmark it. It's great. That's my Twitter. You can follow me. It's okay. All right. So, troubleshooting group policy. What are we going to talk about? All right, we're going to talk about some under the hood changes. Central store. So what's the central store? How can it help you with your group policy? Going to talk about some logging. All right, group policy preferences logging, normal group policy logging. Some of it you might have already seen. Group policy preferences logging. RSOP, going to do some reporting. So like more, how do you troubleshoot when you know you have a problem? And, am I doing something stupid or is it something broken? All right, so some reporting around that and troubleshooting group policy preferences. If I have time at the end, I can pretty much open it up to the floor and talk about anything. So, because I have cut a few slides from this slide deck. So, group policy, right. Windows XP, Windows Server 2003, group policy will get processed in the Win Logon service. Okay? Windows Vista, they pulled that out, made it its own service. That's a hardened service, all right? So it's gone through a lot of reviews from Microsoft to make sure, the service itself is well isolated because, if you can break into the group policy service, you can pretty much control the machine. Client-side extensions, therefore, are also isolated because you need to keep them isolated. Otherwise, if you're in the same process, client-side extensions, if you had a break-in via client-side extension, if there was something wrong with the client-side extension, you could affect the group policy processing. All right. And there was a big change in the way it behaved in offline and high latency, low bandwidth environments. Windows XP days, the ways it would tell, way group policy could tell that you're on a WAN link or you're over a slow link, you have to send a ping. Well, that's great unless you block pings on your WAN links. So they've changed that. So they use now the network location awareness in Windows Vista and above to determine whether or not you're on a slow WAN link. Okay? Bit of a black box. I'm not exactly sure how that one figures it out. I think it, yeah, that's a good one. But the network location awareness basically replaces the fact that you can do ICMP, uses ICMP. So no more ping requirements. All right. But something with that is also that when network location awareness realizes that you've just reconnected to the network straight away, if you missed your last group policy refresh cycle, it'll say, well, you need to do it again right now. Okay? So where before the group policy engine wouldn't detect the fact when you instantaneously connect back to the network. How do you know? There's an event log. So network location awareness triggers the fact that the network topology's changed and it starts processing. All right, troubleshooting the group policy object itself. Okay, so this is basically talking about I've made a change to group policy, it's working for some machines, it's not working for some others. You might have multiple domain controllers in your environment. How can you test that that group policy object is replicating out to all the domain controllers in your environment? Now there are a number of ways that you can do that. One is called GPO tool, which is actually part of the Windows Server 2003 resource kit. So that's my family. I should have turned the screensaver off on that one. All right. So GPO tool is part of the resource kit. All right, pretty simple, but if we go GPO tool/verbose, that's going to go off and check all the group policy objects that are applied to that machine. And if you have multiple domain controllers in your environment, it'll check all the different versions of that group policy object to see if they're okay. If the group policy object's corrupt, it'll return, group policy object wasn't readable. Information you can get out of here is the version of the group policy object. And so if that group policy object exists on multiple domain controllers, which it should, you'll get the version returned multiple times. Now, my environment here, I only have one DC. I apologize about that. It doesn't show you multiple times. But you can kind of get the gist. If you just want some way to say, well, if my group policy object is still replicating, you can use this tool. So what other ways can you test? So litmus test, really easy test. Create a new user anywhere in AD. Then use Active Directory user computers. If you know the site that you think you're troubleshooting, connect to that site's domain controller, see if the user appears. All right? You're just testing general AD replication there. Okay? Create a text file and sysvol. Some people call this like a canary file. Right, Microsoft used to call it that. When the miners would go down the mine shaft, they have a canary, and if the canary died, get out of the mine. So sometimes what you do is you can go to sysvol, create a text file in sysvol, and then watch to see if that goes out and replicates. So check the sysvol on all your individual DCs. A couple of simple tests you can do. All right. If you want to go a bit deeper, there's a tool called Sonar, which I'm pretty sure has now been replaced by a tool called ultrasound. These are more FRS diagnostic tools, but your sysvol is most likely still using FRS replication. Has anyone used DFSR replication in their AD yet? One. Okay, so these tools still apply. So, ultrasound. I'm going to show you quickly. Ultrasound. Again. Oh, gone too far. Oh, I'm back where I started. So ultrasound is an FRS monitoring tool. It'll look at your Active Directory, find your FRS replicated sets in there, and lo and behold, the only one I've got is sysvol. Currently reporting is okay. If you've got replication delays, things aren't quite working, if you've got major backlogs, right, that's going to raise an alert for you. All right. Also in here, so here you can actually look, again, I've only got one DC, but you can look at the inbound and outbound connections on your FRS replication. So if you've got a big backlog of files, so if you've got a major amount of change, that's a really good sign that something's backlogging with your replication. This looks a lot better when you actually have something to show, when you have multiple domain controls. But another one is that propagation test. So propagation test is, again, that instead of just manually creating a text file, this can actually create a text file for you on a scheduled basis. What server do you want to put it on if you have multiple? How big do you want the file? 1 byte? Are you just caring that replication works? Are you caring, is it slow to work with a 1 meg file for FRS? So this tool can also be used for your FRS replicated volumes. So your legacy Windows 2000 to Windows 2003 FRS replicated volumes, not just sysvol. So that's a pretty good tool to test that. You can run it once. You can run it on recurring. So making sure your sysvol is healthy will go a long way to making sure group policy also works. All right. So there's another link there. Slide decks will be published. I know it's a really long one. But just troubleshooting FRS in general. Okay. I'm just going to jump ahead 2 slides because I'm out of sequence here. DFSR replication. You can tell I just whacked this together, can't you? All right, DFSR replication. Windows Server 2008 and above supports DFSR replication. What's that? Well, it's basically a file replication engine on steroids. It's much faster. Why is it faster? If you're replicating large files and you make a change to a file in FRS, if it's a 5 meg file, you change 1 byte in that file, it'll want to replicate the entire 5 megs again. Right? There's no delta block replication in FRS. In DFSR, or DFS replication, it will do 64K chunks. So if you change a 64K chunk in a 1 gigabyte file, it'll just replicate that 64K chunk. If you already have a file on the other partner server that you're doing replication on, and it's very similar to the file you're trying to replicate, it will look at the 2 files, go, well, this is 95% of the same. All right? So I'm just going to replicate the 5% that's different. All right? Who can think of a file that was repeated many times in sysvol? Types of files. ADMs. Yeah, ADMX. Right? Right. ADMX, if you've got a central store, which I'll get to in a minute, not so much, but if you've got an ADM file, right, you've got system.adm, you're going to copy that there once, DFSR is going to go, well, I already have that file. So it's pretty much going to go, well, I already have that file, so I'll just create it from what I already know. Much more efficient. So less bandwidth as well. It actually compresses the information, the stream of information between servers. It'll compress that information. So you'll just get native compression on the information that's transferred between the 2 servers as well. So I can't say enough about DFSR replication just in general. I've put it on very big volumes of data, and the reports that it gives saying, well, you would have transferred, a gigabyte of information, instead you've transferred 300 meg. Massive savings. So you can obviously see if you have that engine in there powering your domain controller sysvol replication, it's going to be far more efficient. Has far less chance of general wrap. It's pretty much impossible, which apparently happens quite a lot with FRS and system vols, and it's very bad to try to recover from. And again, there's another really useful URL from migrating from an FRS environment to a DFSR environment. Central Store. Okay. So, Windows Vista, Windows Server 2000, well actually Windows Vista came out, introduced this concept of a central store. Now I mentioned before, ADM files get replicated again many times in your environment. You go into sysvol, you go to that random GUID for the group policy object, you have ADM files in there. Every group policy object has its own set of ADM files. So each group policy object can be about 5 meg. So who has over 100 group policy objects in your environment? Who has over 500? Okay. Over 1,000? Yeah. I was once in a session that they said they had over 10,000 group policy objects in their environment. Wow. Okay. I was just blown away at that. So, what does the central store do? Central store consolidates all the ADM files to one folder. Sorry, not ADM files, ADMX files to one folder. Windows Vista now has, and Windows 7 of course, now uses ADMX files. An ADMX file is a language agnostic settings file for your group policy objects. All right, I'll show you. It's a lot easier just to show. So even if you look on your local machine, see Windows, policy definitions, these are now all the ADMX files. They've broken them up a lot more. All right. You can go in. If you break them open, it's XML. You'll actually not see any, you won't see any language specific information in there that is presented to the user, unlike with an ADM file. ADM file, you'd have like the comments in there and you have the sections, you know, this policy does X, Y, Z. All right, instead it marries up with the ENUS, most of them are ENUS, but you have the language UI on this. Now, the advantage of this is that you can have one policy that defines the setting, and as you can see, all the UI there that's split out, and one policy that defines the language that's displayed to the user on a per user basis. So, this policy definitions folder here is all the ADMX and ADML files, and that's local though to the machine. All right? If you create a new group policy object in Active Directory and you don't have what they call the central central store in your environment, it'll create a new copy of the ADMX file for each policy, or ADM, depending on what you're editing from. So, how do you establish a central store? So you open up the system volume. Go under policies. It's really difficult, this is. You can copy the ones from the local machine to your system volume. Wow, that was hard. Okay. What I didn't show you actually was before. So if you have a look now, I wonder if this is going to make a liar out of me. Yay, it worked. ADMX files retrieved from the central store. I'd actually shown you that from before, which I meant to, but sorry. It would have said ADMX files retrieved from the local computer. Okay, that means now that every new group policy object that I create, right, won't have the ADM files in it. It'll just say, refer to the policy definitions folder in the system vol here. So if we dig into one of these, oh no, that's not it. I'll get there eventually. Nope. like I've made these properly. No? Okay. If I made it with a Windows XP machine, okay, the ADM file would still get copied up into each one of those policy objects. Okay, so central store is good for AD replication, right? AD replication, the reason we're talking about that is that it's really important to make sure your AD replication, because if you don't, is working properly. So if you don't have that working properly, yeah, it's just a world of hurt. You're just going to have so many strange behaviors. Also remember, if you've got lots of different Active Directory sites, you make a change to a group policy object, you have to wait for both the local group policy refresh on your machine, but you also have to wait for that information to propagate out to the domain controller. Okay? So when you do create a replication, a new setting, you have to add the time that it would take to replicate that setting out to the new domain controller plus the maximum time it would take for that policy to get applied to a machine. So if you're busily editing a group policy object inside A and you're wondering why it's not working inside B, just wait sometimes is the answer. Okay? You can kind of get around it a little bit by pointing Group Policy Management Console to a specific domain controller. But that also has a few troubles because then you might have the object out there before AD has actually caught up. So if you want to where we go? Change domain controller. So if you want to be specific on what DC you want to make those changes on, generally pick on a central domain controller that's in the central hub of your AD replication. All right, that way, if you make it out at a remote branch site, it's going to take a long time for it to then, it's going to take the time it takes to replicate back to the central site, but then the time it takes again to replicate out to another hub's spoke site. Another example there, ADMX file retrieved from the central store. Diffusar replication, covered that. So troubleshooting the central store. Is it not properly created? Not all the ADMX files are in place. Okay. And not ADMLs. So when I showed you before, I copied out the policy definitions. Right now, it's only got the English US languages there. So if you're a big multinational company and you say want the Japanese language out there, you have to make sure that the corresponding ADML files are also copied out. Otherwise, someone who's going to be editing those group policies, it's going to look pretty, it's just going to come up as don't have the, in group policy management console, it's not going to have any explanation about that. It's just going to come up as like a not managed or just an additional registry setting. Okay. If you want a copy of the other languages on a domain controller, this is now the DC. Oh, let's. Oh no, sorry, local hard drive. Oh, it's not there either. You can download the ADML files from the downloads.microsoft.com. I thought they were automatically populated on the local cache on the local domain controller, but they're not. Sorry, my bad. So that's the sort of message you see when you don't have the correct ADML. Sorry, no. That's the sort of message you see when you create a group policy object on a Windows XP machine and it's using an ADM and you then edit it on another machine, running Windows 7 with the central store configured. It can't find the corresponding language file for that registry key. Okay? So if you've got a custom registry setting and the registry setting on the ADM file doesn't match the registry setting in the ADMX or the ADML file, you're going to get that extra registry setting there. So basically make sure that the registry or the policy settings that you're creating, if you've got custom ADM files, that's where it's going to come up more likely, is that when you're editing in Windows 7, you make sure the paths match, okay? So like I said, don't edit group policy objects on Windows XP machines if you have a central store already created, because Windows XP is just completely unaware of what the central store is. Okay, and you'll see those. You see the errors when editing the group policy objects. So other tips. So this is just some general tips on troubleshooting group policy. Might be a little bit out of sequence here, but this is what I always use for troubleshooting group policy. Group policy management console. This is great to actually give to the service desk, right? Don't give them admin access to group policy. By default, all group policy objects are read by everyone, so they can look at that. So they can go in and start looking at what settings there are on policies, but also the ability to run a group policy result. So what this does is it actively connects to a machine, says, tell me all the group policy settings that you have applied to your machine as of the last group policy update. Okay? And it will return it back in a really nice format. Now, I'll just rerun that query. So I'm just querying it on the local machine here, but I could just as easily point it to another computer. Right? Don't have another computer, but also a specific user. So even if they're not logged on, it'll just, if they're a cached user, it can retrieve that information as well. So here we have the summary page. One of the ones I really like, and I don't use this just for troubleshooting group policy, is this one here. If you're troubleshooting why a group policy object isn't applied to a computer or user, this one's great. But this here is actually a great way to tell all the security groups the user is a member of, not just directly but indirectly, so nested groups. You know, you go Active Directory users and computers and you say, show me a list of all the groups in the members tab. You know, this user is a member of all these groups, that's great, but if there's a group within a group, right, you have to start double-clicking on them all. This is a really easy and quick. I found the easiest way. Right, there are command lines, definitely other ways you can do this, but I found this is the easiest way to get a nice list of every security group the user is a member of. I've used this a couple of times with AD token bloat issues. Right? Who knows what AD token bloat issue is? No? There's a limit to the number of security groups that you can be a member of. And by default, I think it's at about 200-300 security groups. You can push that up, setting the AD token size to a lot higher, but you're then looking at about maybe 1,000 groups. Depends on the type of groups also that you're a member of. Depends, takes a little bit of memory in the user's Kerberos token, right? And when the user is a member of so many groups that their Kerberos token just isn't big enough to keep a list of it all, it's like the user just randomly stops being a member of those groups. One of the common signs of that is when you join a computer to the domain, right, you get an out-of-memory error. Right? That's a really common one because your local machine has a default Kerberos token size, I think, depending on the OS, I think it's like 16K. Well, no, that's probably a bit old now. It has a smaller default token size. Right, but once it's joined to the domain, you can get a policy to say, well, give me a larger AD token size. Right? So a lot of other people won't see that. But that's a good way there too. Is if you do a report on the machine and the user's a member of hundreds and hundreds of groups, and maybe IIS authentication's not working. IIS, who's ever heard of URL scan? It's a thing that IIS uses to ensure that you're not sending too much information to the ports, like it's accepting, okay, well, this is supposed to be a 16K post header. I'm only going to accept 16K worth of data on this, otherwise I'm going to drop it because someone's maybe trying to do an out of bands. Right? In IIS, if you're trying to authenticate IIS and you've got too many security groups, IIS can go, oh, you remember too many security groups, you're trying to pass me a token via HTTP and I'm just going to drop it. So sometimes you can also have authentication issues with IIS. Yeah. So the other thing that you can do, obviously, component status, yellow exclamation mark there. Look at that. Really easy. So there's an error at the moment with folder redirection. All right. So then the other tab here is policy events. And this is going to show me all the policy events about that machine. All right. And Windows failed to apply folder redirection, exclamation mark. All right, so you get a lot of information here about why group policy was failing on that machine from this tab. It's a good first start, all right? Plus, you got the settings report here. You can go in and you can start drilling down. Maybe a setting is applying and you want to know why it's applying. You can start going in, have a look at the individual setting. Well, what was the winning GPO? Well, it was the workstation's GPO. So I know to go to that group policy object there and look at why that, why that group policy object's applying that setting. So this is a really good first step in troubleshooting group policy. Another one I really like, and I just like this one because it actually makes the users, I think, a little bit happier, especially in the Windows XP days where sometimes, logons could take a little while. And all it says is applying settings. Well, applying settings is really boring for a user to look at, so they get a bit cheesed off at it. I like this one here, verbose versus normal status logon, verbose versus normal status messages. This just gives you a more detailed logon, right? It gives you a few more status messages, gives the impression to the user, hey, my computer is actually doing something, it's not just applying settings. But what you can use it for is that if it's stuck at folder redirection, you'll see that it takes a little bit longer just by rebooting it from the machine, right? That the folder redirection is what's taking time. If you're adding a lot of printers and you're wondering why your logon's taking such a long time, right, you'll see that it's stuck, it'll be adding printers. Now I'm going to enable this option. I'm going to do a GP update. While it's running, I'm going to connect to the console of the machine. So I'll just apply this, and then, so it's going to whiz by pretty quickly, but what I hope you understand is that, yeah, it showed a little bit more information that I'm used to seeing, even on a Windows 7 logon. Okay, so that's now applied. I'm going to log off. So, is it going to disappear? Yeah. So watch carefully. Hopefully. No? All right, maybe I need another GP update. Yeah, you're probably right. Why did I do that? Ding. Shouldn't take too long because it's on a virtual machine. It's just Windows 7. Sorry about that. So I liken this to, I heard a story once about how there was a building that had 3 elevators. Could be a hotel that hosts tech ed, I suppose. and they had really slow elevators. And it was going to cost like $1 million to put in a new elevator. Okay. Instead of putting in a new elevator, they put in mirrors next to each door, each elevator, and people stopped complaining about how slow the elevators were because they were there. They were like, while they were waiting, they were in the mirror going, "Yeah, my hair's fine," and it's like because there was a distraction while they logged on. It's just something that they just went, "Oh yeah, it didn't take that long, I suppose." It's like because they're distracted. All right, so that's how I kind of liken this to. It's a bit of psychology, but from a troubleshooting point of view, look at that. Look, so it's applying registry items, folder redirection. So if that was stuck there for a long time, you could say, well, I know it's folder redirection, preparing your desktop, printer mappings, drive mappings, all those settings, they'll apply there as it's processing it. All right, I just use that as a general. I sometimes just leave it on, okay, because the users aren't going to mind that it's turned on, but it just gives me some cues. Okay? All right, I'll log off there and log back on. All right, user env.log. All right, we all probably love it and hate it. All right, if you ever troubled group policy before, all right, that's the log file that you would normally go to. You'd have to turn it on in the registry though, okay, before it would work. Now, there's a tool there. Again, I'm copying it from Jeremy's slides, so I'm sure Jeremy knows the tool's pretty cool. So there's a tool there, sysprosoft policy reporter. Make this log file a little bit more meaningful. But I'm going to show you how to enable it using group policy preferences. Because, we love group policy preferences from the session we saw last time. So here, and this is going to be more of a group policy preference tip, is an XML file. All right, have a look at that. So name, user env, debug level. Okay, there's the registry key. HKey software, Microsoft Windows NT, current version, WinLog on. The name, user env, debug level 30002. Okay, so how do I enable that? So if I edit a group policy, I can go in, if I know the registry key, I can type it in manually. All right, so I'm into registry keys here. I'm going to delete this. Let's pretend that doesn't exist. I'm just going to copy that, paste it into there. It's just appeared. All configured, exactly how I want it. All right, so if I don't necessarily want this turned on all the time, because let's face it, we don't want to turn on this verbose logging all the time, I can have that XML file sitting somewhere, all right, and remember I talked about targeting. If you wanted to just target it for one computer, you can go into targeting and group policy preferences there and just target it to the computer name. Name is foo, whatever it is. And you've just turned on verbose logging just for that machine, right, rather than having to turn it on for all your machines. You could have done the registry key manually as well, but maybe you wanted to, do it remotely, or maybe they're in a different site, or, for some reason. But, just a tip there. So how did I create this XML file? I'll actually delete that file. I go copy, paste. All right, that's a pretty cool tip. All right, so if I have, let's say, multiple, I can even go copy, paste, paste, paste. So if I have the same, it's the same registry key again and again and again. But if I have multiple registry keys, I can select all those registry keys, goes copy, paste. I now have one registry key there called just registry settings, general, but I've got all 4 of those registry keys defined there. All right, so like I said, this is more a preferences tip. So if you want to have a predefined set of registry settings, rather than having a .reg file, you can have this XML file. All right, so if you wanted to quickly go and update it, you can just go in here, manually update it. So, we had that registry number, so we could change, to 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can use that for all sorts of things. All right, so we've turned it on. Okay. Oh, don't know what that was about. So we're going to go to C, Windows, debug, user mode. there's the log file there in all its glory. Okay, obviously the time there. It's pretty verbose, and this file is actually being deprecated now. All right, so it'll still work, but it's not the primary. Moving forward, Microsoft are, funnily enough, using event logs, but there's also some other log files around group policy preferences. Now, this is the old tried and tested. If you're running Windows XP, if you're running Windows 2000, you look in here for the information about group policy, troubleshooting group policy. So we've enabled that. So what does that mean? There's the log file. There's the time. All right, you can tell it's on the same process because the process information there. Part on the right, that's the stuff that you use to help troubleshoot. So if you're troubleshooting a policy, maybe look for the policy name. Look for the keys in that, or look for the signs in that file there, the clues basically to troubleshoot. And there's bits in there too that really, bit of red herrings there, Jeremy says. So moving on. So like I said, user env.log is going away. Event log is more and more going to be the way you're going to start troubleshooting group policies. So the basic group policy settings or group policy event logs for troubleshooting, you're going to still find under System. Come on. Okay. All right. And so you can filter the event log. So this is just on the source. Group policy. I don't know if I actually have any general ones in here. Oh. Yeah. All right. But the specific one for really detailed information, right, is now under here. Group policy. Just a few, 7,000. All right. So lots of information there. So you can see the information that it's even giving me some diagnostics here that folder redirection took a little while to process. Well, that's because I've got a folder redirection there that's going to an invalid location, but it's probably just timing out trying to find that location first. All right, so I logged on in 7 seconds. So if you want to troubleshoot the speed of your logons, this is a good way. Come in here. You can actually go through and start looking at that. Fast network location awareness, estimating what my bandwidth is. All right, if you have a bandwidth threshold, all right, that you've configured, you can now configure the threshold that you want to have slow link detection or slow link detection, so some of your group policy settings don't apply. You can configure that threshold. But if you're wondering, it's like, well, I should have enough bandwidth there. Okay, obviously you can go in here and you can see what Windows, the bandwidth that what Windows thinks is it has. I'm connected locally, so it's really quick. Okay, and you can compare that with that. So one I want to see too is it actually tell you when the next group policy refresh. Yeah, next group policy refresh will be attempted in 92 minutes. Okay, just in case you want to know, you just when was the last time that the policy was processed on that machine? Okay. Showed you that. Well, I showed you a bit of a demo. Okay, GP result. All right, if you don't have access to Group Policy Management Console and you're on the machine, here's another way you can get some of the information that you could get doing a result report. So if you're on a machine, GP, I think it's H. Oh, funny that. All right, information about me, the site I'm in, the user settings, last time group policy was applied. If you're just on a machine and you want to troubleshoot it, this is, you know, kind of a good first step. Again, slow link threshold. You can go there and get a lot of information there. The main type's only Windows 2000. What group policy objects were applied to me? Right, that's a nice one. Why am I not getting this setting? You know, not applied. Why? Well, because the policy object's empty. Other things could be, could be security filtered. So another tool there you can use. Now, sometimes you can get access denied error messages. I'll just show you a quick screenshot when you're trying to do this on the computer. Right? And yes, I've come across this too. It is very frustrating because you're an administrator and you're getting access denied of that machine, but you're really querying parts of the AD for this. So what we can do is if you go on organizational unit here and go to the delegation tab, you can actually start looking at the permissions. So read group policy results data from this OU. Okay, go in there, make sure that the user, if you're getting those permissions, make sure they're added in there. So, add authenticated users. You go in there, you can now do, you're just giving read access to this information. I think information's powerful, so you can do that so that you can start doing these result instead of the GP results on the machines. Okay, moving through. Troubleshooting group policy preferences. All right. GP result H. Okay. In the previous session that I did, I showed multiple ways you can configure the local administrator account. All right. That looked like, I'll go in and edit it. This. But I don't really know, so I know I'm doing something to the administrator's built-in group. Okay. When I do a report on a machine, rerun, okay. I go into local users and groups. It's confusing. Like I've just got administrators there. Well, what's this one supposed to do? Well, I can start drilling in and having a bit of a look in that way. All right. So what I'm saying is that rather than just use the default name out of the box, give it something that's a little bit, intuitive. So this one here is the local admins. I'll rename this local administrator. All right. This one here, main admins. All right. So this is just good practice naming conventions that'll help you basically troubleshoot, just a good naming convention. Okay. Just trust me. I'm actually running out of time, I can't believe. Basically, you go in here and you actually see all right, so example, killer game icons, kill games. What does that look like in a report? Have it actually come up. You've got kill games there and kill computer icons. It's not the same, okay, so it's just a little bit easier to troubleshoot. Troubleshooting group policy preferences. All right. Yep. Yeah, no. Yeah. So if you start going in there, but what I'd do is take a copy of with the name as an XML file. When I copied it out, all right, you can either edit the XML file so you preserve the name and just copy it back in. You could do it that way. So group policy preferences, troubleshooting. So you've got some pretty detailed logging you can do on each individual preference setting that your computer sets. If I go in here, Go into policies, admin templates. I'm going to say this in advance. This is not going to work. There's no logging advance under there. And it gets a bit confusing. Why is there no logging advance under here? Basically, Windows Vista and Windows 7 doesn't have the group policy preferences advanced logging ADMX file installed. All right, you can download it and you can install it. All right, but to save time, I'm just going to go in here and show it under here. Oops, sorry. Oh, that's right, I created it from the system central store. I copied my group ADMX files from my Windows 7 machine to the central store. So what I have done is I've got, I'm on the wrong machine here. I've downloaded and installed the preferences policy definition. That's a good example of all the languages, all right, for a policy. I just want ENUS and I just want that one. I'm going to copy that and I'm going to put that into here. Go back, edit this group policy object, hopefully, fingers crossed. Yay. So I've now enabled the new setting there. So you see how that easy that was? I just put a new ADMX into the policy definitions folder. Every machine in the organization now would instantly pick that up because I'm using a central store. I wouldn't have had to well, actually, would need to wait for replication, but I'm just replicating that file at once. So I can go in here and I can troubleshoot, turn on troubleshooting for any of the group policy preferences options in here. So the one I want is registry. I'm in logging and tracing, that's where I want to go. There we go, there's the group policy preferences in there. What I want to do is enable policy preferences processing. I want to turn on all information. It's going to write it to here. All right, computer, if it's a computer-based, I'm going to write it to there. I just want to turn on user. So I've just enabled that. And now what I'm going to do is, do we remember yesterday, I don't know if you're in the course, in the session, I was doing one on Adobe Acrobat Reader. All right, so I can set a registry key. Software, Adobe Acrobat Reader, JS Press. All right, there it is. I want to set that to 0, but let's say I got my targeting wrong. All right, file match, if the file exists. Adobe Reader. But let's say maybe I didn't use the thing and I just had a typo in there and I hit OK. And so I think this is going to apply now, this registry key is going to apply to my machine, where it's not. So what it's going to do is now it creates the group policy preferences log under program data, group policy, preferences, trace. Here's one I prepared earlier. All right. And I can now go very similar. That was the test. exe1 succeeded, false. All right. And that's why it failed the filter. All right. The filters did not pass, so that did not apply. Okay. There's the registry key that I was, the name of the registry preference that I was trying to apply. So if you're trying to troubleshoot individual group policy preferences, right, make sure you've got the group policy preferences.admx file installed, okay, and enable the logging on an individual policy by policy, where am I, setting. If you're just processing one just process one. But that is a native setting, so you are enabling that on all your machines. Yep. So if you've already created a group policy object with the ADMs, yeah, those ADMs aren't going to magically disappear out of those group policy objects. If I've deleted the settings, the ADMs, which are the definitions of those settings, will still live in the group policy object. You'd have to delete the group policy object. Yeah. Yeah, it gets really messy then too, especially when you're in a mixed Windows XP environment. Okay. All right. So, like I talked about that, group policy preferences.admx ADML file, copy that to the central store, install the ADMSI, and move it up to your central store if you want to enable troubleshooting on group policy preferences. The link is there. It's a long link, but the slides will be on the schedule builder soon. And I don't really have time to talk about much else because we finished at 5:15, don't we? So I went really slow then. I'm sorry. I hope I didn't bore you. Okay. So that's the end. There's the plug. GP Answers. I will say, Jeremy has a tool, product called Policy Pack. And this is probably just a shameless plug for him, but you know, he's sick, so we have to feel sorry for him. I'm sure he'll feel really bad. He was going to do a really good session tomorrow on Total Workstation Lockdown. And what he has is a product that will go in and selectively block the UI of specific dialog boxes and applications. So it doesn't matter which application. So you can go into Adobe Acrobat Reader and start disabling the user interface in Adobe Acrobat Reader. All right, you kind of do some sort of a capture. It's called Policy Pack. All right, if you go to his website, GP Answers. So it allows you to apply restrictive UI settings to an application that is not group policy aware. All right, he hasn't asked me to promote this. I just think it's a really cool tool, and I think it's worth a little bit of time. So if that sort of stuff interests you in policy enabling applications that aren't or are group policy aware, go to his website, GP Answers. Look for, I think he also has policypack.com. Otherwise, repeat of the session tomorrow at 9 a.m. Of the group policy preferences. I'm going to show you a whole heap of new group policy preferences ideas. So if you liked all the golden nuggets that I gave you yesterday, I have a whole heap more. All right, so please come to that. Evaluation forms in the session builder. People always go, I never got the piece of paper for the evaluation. Evaluation's now online. I shouldn't tell you this because you're probably going to give me a bad evaluation for this, but hopefully you won't. But if you go to your schedule builder online, there's now an E next to the session name. You click on that, and that's how you evaluate a session, and if you didn't know. Okay. Apparently, you've got 72 hours to do it. I don't know if that's actually going to happen. So if you're just waiting for a couple of days, make sure you don't wait too long. Okay. Thank you very much. I hope it was useful. And if you have any questions outside of